Good evening. My name is Kevin Ring. I serve as president of FAMM, a national criminal justice reform organization. Tonight, we're going to talk about can we get equal? And this is in regard to the Equal Act, which is pending in Congress to finally, once and for all, eliminate the unwarranted sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine sentences. And so tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about policy, but we're going to really talk a lot more about people because I think people get lost in this discussion. There's too much talk about recidivism numbers and things like that, all of which are important, all of which we're happy to address. But the urgency of this issue and the reason Congress needs to pass it now is because there's 7,000 people who could come home sooner if this law would pass. The Equal Act passed the United States House of Representatives last September, 361 to 66, overwhelming bipartisan majority, which included 70% of the Republican caucus, and the Kevin McCarthy and the Republican leadership all supported it. In the Senate, it has 11 Republican co-sponsors, no Democratic opposition. So we're already at a filibuster-proof 61 votes in support of that. And yet we're still waiting for it to be considered. And as we get closer and closer to the midterm election, we do not want the clock to run out. And we want people to understand what this means to the people whose loved ones would be affected by this. And so I want to start. We're going to have two different panels. The first is going to be people who were directly impacted, who served these unfair terms. And then we're going to have a panel of people whose loved ones are still serving time and who would be reunited sooner if we could get this law passed. And so I want to welcome Dejarion Echols, Matthew Charles, who also serves as a FAMM policy associate, and my friend Stephanie Nod. And I'm going to start in reverse order of release. So I'm going to start with you, Dejarion. And if you could just give a little bit about your story, your sentence, how it was affected by this disparity.
In 2005, I had the misfortune of being sentenced to 240 months total of incarceration in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. 120 months of that was directly related to possession of crack cocaine, and the other 20 months was in regards to a gun charge. But due to the laws in place with regards to the sentencing disparity, I served, and I can't for sure say the exact amount of time, but it was anywhere over 5 years longer than I would have had it not been for, the sentencing disparity that we're striving to eradicate with the Equal Act. And again, man, I've always said it, and I'm gonna continue to say it, that one day of incarceration is too long. It's when you're removed from that which gives you purpose, which is your family. So having to go an extra 5 years and serving that inordinate sentence was devastating, not only to me, but obviously to my family, because we're talking about 5 years of memories lost. We're talking about 5 years of uh, not being able to walk according to my purpose as a husband, as a father, as a son, not being able to put forward whatever goals and accomplishments that I wanted to achieve. And it's heartrending. And I feel, as we all do, that it's very necessary that this law is passed so that many more won't have to suffer a similar plight. Um, but again, we're going to continue to do our part. So yeah, I had to do 5 years extra. I made it home in June of last year, 2021, and I'm going to continue to pay it forward and being a voice for the voiceless.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned you had additional time because of a gun. Did anyone get hurt in your offense? Did you use the gun?
No, I was a first time nonviolent offender. Had never been in any trouble. The gun was there were no bullets. Um, and when you think about the technicalities of the law, you actually have to be in possession. You have to be doing a deal with the gun on your person in order to actually trigger the extra 10-year mandatory minimum. In my particular case, that wasn't the issue. The gun was at home under the bed. Again, there were no bullets. It was never any evil intent with regards to the gun. It was just simply a matter of having it. But because of the laws intact, the prosecutor was able to utilize that and add an extra 10 years upon my sentence, totaling a 240 months. But no, there was never anyone hurt. And again, it was the first time non-violent offender. Uh, and I was sentenced to 20 years of incarceration on that first offense.
I think something that, always stuck out to everyone at FAM about your case was something the judge said at sentencing. Can you tell folks what the judge said when he had to sentence you to that long of a term?
Absolutely. The judge said, And you know, quite honestly, due to the shock of sentencing, I didn't hear the judge say it. It was only when I got my sentencing transcript, because you're kind of in a daze when you're standing before the courts. But he said, this is a case where I would like to see a congressman sitting before me, you know, basically stating that he did want to give me that amount of time. But because his hands are tied due to the mandatory minimums that are on the books, he had no choice. But it was that statement, if you ask me, in my opinion, that got me access to your organization, and that brought more awareness to the situation, because it proved that if a judge who's responsible for enacting justice feels that this is unjust, then it becomes obvious that there's something wrong with the system.
Yeah. I want to bring in Matthew. Matthew also, by the end of his term, had a judge who was going to bat for him because he realized the unfairness of the sentence. Matthew, a lot of people know you and your story, but if you can talk about your sentence and how it was impacted by the disparity.
In 1995, I was arrested. I was selling crack cocaine. At the time, I didn't really know that there was this great disparity between the two drug types, because I wasn't focused on what the law between those two drugs, crack cocaine and powder cocaine, was. I just was arrested for crack cocaine. And during the sentencing phase, I ended up finding out that there was 101 ratio disparity between those two drugs, simply because one was feared more than the other. And it just so happened that the drug type that I was selling was the drug type that was easily accessible in the community in which I live. And of course, cheaper than powder cocaine. So therefore, it is a lot more sought after and sold by addicts, as well as people that actually sold the drug. So in 1995, I was arrested for possession of crack cocaine. An informant turned me in. I ended up going before the court in 1996 and receiving a 35-year sentence. This sentence was in excess of 20 years had it been powder cocaine. But I still, like I stated, didn't understand the disparity between those two drugs. So once I actually went into federal prison and started serving that sentence, and came in contact with some other people that had sentences similar to mine, because at the time, 50 grams or more in the criminal history category that I was in yielded a sentence of 30 years to life, and I was given 35 years. So I met people that actually had the life sentence. Some of them had life plus, meaning more than just life sentence, but there's nonviolent drug offenses, no violence attached to their, charge or anything. They just had life because of, at that time, the judge could impose life. It was 30 to life. So I ended up serving 21 years and 7 months on that sentence before I was released in 2016. What had happened was there was a change in the law in 2010 called the Fair Sentencing Act that lowered the crack cocaine ratio from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1. Well, I felt that I was entitled to that change, so I filed a petition with the court seeking to have my sentence changed. And my sentence was changed. A federal judge changed my sentence, and when he changed my sentence, I was able to be released. And during the time that I was released, I was doing everything that you would want a returning citizen to do. I mean, I worked, I attended church, I volunteered, and I started reconnecting with my family. And the government appealed my release because they stated that it didn't apply to me because I was a career offender. And the Court of Appeal sided with them, and in 2018 ordered me to return to prison, in which I voluntarily surrendered on May 14th. And what I had to do was go back and serve that additional 10 years. Now, mind you, all of that is just based on the disparity between those two drug types, that had I still been incarcerated today, it would be because the ratio was still 100 to 1 as opposed to 18 to 1. Not because I needed to be held for any more rehabilitative purposes or any other, wrongdoing of the law, just between, because of that racial disparity between those two drug types. And the First Step Act passed in December of 2018. And when the First Step Act passed, it had an amendment that made retroactive those changes to the Fair Sentencing Act. So therefore, I was released again. And once I was able to be released, then I was able to also, bear in mind those many men and women that are still behind bars, some of them even with a 100 to 1 sentence, and some of them with the 18 to 1 sentence. And I understand that that disparity just needs to be done away with. We have the opportunity 35 years later to be able to do something about a disparity that shouldn't even exist 35 minutes. And yet we're still not able to get it accomplished just yet. So it is my hope and prayer that the Equal Act will pass. As you stated earlier, Kevin, I mean, we got large bipartisan support. We just need to have it brought up before the Senate and be heard on it. I believe we'll even be surprised with the numbers that actually vote for it. So it is my hope that those men and men that still want to be returned to their families, just like I was returned to mine, return to their communities that was devastated by the war on drugs, by this 100-to-1 ratio that had no true scientific purpose, just, an overreaction to what was happening at the time, to be returned to theirs as well.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you to talk more about this, but Stephanie, I want to bring you in so people can hear your story. And I just want to remark that there is no coincidence here that the three guests talking about serving extreme sentences for crack cocaine are African-American. We know that the impact is severely felt in the African-American community just because of drug use patterns and because of policing patterns. And we know that if the Equal Act passed, 91% of the beneficiaries would be African-American. But Stephanie, your story, drives me crazy. And I won't ask you to tell the whole story, but if you can talk about your sentence and, how the crack disparity played a role.
Okay, back in 1990, I was charged and indicted on a one-count indictment, conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute crack cocaine. I was a first-time offender. I was sentenced to 30 years in prison. When I came to prison, I had 4 kids and I was carrying an unborn. During that time, I served that time. As time went on, I kept on filing different motions and stuff. It kept getting denied. And I wrote to different Congress, no resort, but the help from my family and stuff. And then I met FAMM. But I met FAMM back in 1991 when Julie Stewart had first started the organization, and reading how her letters coming in and stuff. I still didn't get no support. And then finally, one day, Ava wrote me, and they wanted to do a story on me. And they did my story. Then, Kevin, you came along. Then you came along, and you couldn't believe that I had 30 years, and you helped me a lot, and you pushed my story, and you kept doing stories on me with reporters and stuff. And I had did that. I really came home on that when they changed that 2-point enhancement, when they changed the sentencing guideline. That's how I actually came home. But from FAMM pushed my case.
What year did you come home?
In 2011.
And you ultimately served, even with those benefits. How long did you serve?
21 years.
21 years. And your life of crime consisted of about a month?
Yeah, 6 weeks. They didn't catch no drug, just based on hearsay.
Yeah. Did you have any idea at the time that by being involved with somebody, who is, or, however you were involved, selling crack carried such a stiffer penalty than powder cocaine or some other drug?
No, you didn't hear of it.
Yeah.
You didn't hear of it. But when I got convicted, when the probation officer came to see me, he told me about the guideline was a 100-to-1 ratio. I still didn't understand it, and then he was telling me I was facing life. I said, life? I'm facing life. I ain't get caught with no drug, just on hearsay. He said, yeah, based on testimony, gonna get you life.
Yeah. So just for people, there's a lot of talk about, sentences and people, you do the crime, you should do the time. But we also need some proportionality and justice and fairness. And I just don't know anyone who could think that your 6-month limited involvement in that conspiracy should result in a life sentence, or what you ultimately got, which was 30 years until there were changes made.
It was 6 weeks.
6 weeks, yeah.
Facing a conspiracy.
Well, 6 weeks then maybe you deserved it. I thought it was just a month.
Kevin, no. 21 years I did. It don't take that long for somebody to realize their mistake.
What would you see in prison? When you were in prison, did you see other people were serving longer sentences for crack?
Yes. And let me tell you this, my roommate, her name is Gail Matthews. She had 10 years. And she got busted with 479 kilos. She got busted with 479 kilos in her possession, and she got 10 years. I didn't get caught with nothing. I got 30 years. And this is my roommate. And they gave her a mule charge.
Hmm.
It's just unfair.
And what would you say to people like, you broke the law? I know there were questions about the evidence that was used to attribute how much drugs you sold, but I know you've said, you broke the law, you deserve to be held accountable. But how do you explain to people that, a mother with 4 kids, another one coming, that's a sentence of 3 decades away from them, and whether that supposed to make us feel safer? When you hear people say, don't do the crime if you can't do the time, what do you say to that?
I don't believe in that. I did the crime, but my crime didn't deserve the time I got.
Right.
And now I would accept my responsibility, but they wanted me to cooperate. That's why I didn't accept my responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then you're given no choice at that point.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, how long have you been out? And so, it's 10 years.
10 years.
And what are you doing now?
I work. I'm at work at Action Resource. You see, I got my uniform on.
Yeah, I know. We got you right off the job. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I've been on this job going on 9 years. It's good. And since I've been home, everything been good. I can really say I had it been some ups and downs, but overall, it been good to me. Everything been good to me.
Yeah. Dejarion, I'm going to ask you. You've been home. What what politicians are scared of? If they make these changes and they let people out sooner, they're going to come home and reoffend. There's no guarantee of zero recidivism, but there's also just no evidence that people who are serving these extremely long sentences getting little relief is going to lead to any, reduction in public safety. What do you say to those about, do the time, after committing that crime? Do you just think they don't understand how long that is, or what do you say?
Right. I think it's a combination of many things. I think first and foremost, it's a misnomer that if a person does an egregious amount of time, that it's better for them and society as a whole. I'm of the belief that the longer that a person does, the worse off he can come home, and the worse off for society, because it reaches a point to where it becomes counterintuitive. Like Stephanie mentioned, it doesn't take 30 years to recognize a wrongdoing and to correct that wrongdoing. But after doing an extensive amount of time, you regress, because it's like, what's the point? But when people say, do the crime, do the time, I think that's coming from a place of ignorance. And that's why it's very necessary for, organizations such as FAMM, for individuals such as ourselves to, be a voice and push forth the truth so that the narrative can change. Because if we as a society become informed to the egregious nature of these laws, then we could stymie and stop them at their initiation, and we won't have to wait 35 years to try and enact change. We could meet it at the forefront and get out in front of it. So yeah, I just relate that to just straight up ignorance or indifference, and both of them are bad for the greater good. So yeah, again, you mentioned it, and it's something that I always pride myself on as well, is that accountability. I'm a firm believer in accountability. If I do something that warrants a 20-year sentence, then give me that time. But the crime and the time should be commensurate with one another. And with the case of the mandatory minimums and the crack cocaine disparities, that's not particularly the case.
Well, a lot of people talk about deterrence, and so I'm going to ask you what I asked Stephanie. It was like, did you know that crack carried these much stiffer penalties? Did
not
you
at
know
all.
That? Yeah,
and not at all. I was ignorant to that reality, and I'm being honest. Had I known that, it would have been a deterrent. I won't say that it wouldn't have been, but I was just ignorant to the realities of the disparities. And as a result of that, it netted me, a 240-month sentence.
Yeah. Matthew, how about you? You didn't know about the disparity when you were, selling drugs, right?
No, I never heard about any disparity until I was arrested for the defense.
Yeah. And how about the people that you were in prison for a long time? You met a lot of people in on different charges. How did the crack sentences step up? You all are not unusual. Crack sentences, we know, especially in the era you served them, were much longer. Is that what you saw inside?
Yes, I saw an overwhelming amount of people with life sentences. And the fact that they had life sentences and life sentences plus just didn't make any sense to me. And some of it was based on what state they actually were sentenced out of, even though it was a federal offense, what state they were sentenced out of, and how bad the prosecutor was mad at them, as Stephanie alluded to earlier as well, because they didn't cooperate and turn different people in. And because of that, they tried to make them, an example of them, not because they were any worse, but just because they had the, positional authority to be able to do so.
Well, your story is always considered so remarkable because of your faith journey, because you had no disciplinary infractions. I mean, but do you think of yourself as a unicorn, or did you see a lot of people serving excess time that they didn't need, that they probably needed some, but they didn't need what they got?
Well, I definitely wasn't a unicorn or an anomaly. It was a lot of people that were sentenced there, like I said, with the same sentence or more. As a matter of fact, even as Stephanie stated, her roommate, even though it was the flip side, had 400 something. I think she was talking about keys of powder being a mule, and she had the crack cocaine and received their sentence. Well, I had my first cellmate was Clarence, who thankfully he is out because of the Obama administration gave him clemency, although the clemency didn't kick in until years later. But he actually had a life sentence plus 30 years. And I was looking at it and I was like, but he was from, at that time, the state of Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken. And like I said, it was just dependent upon the state. There were a lot of people. I'm not just going to, pull out some states, but some states were worse than others. But still, they had the opportunity to be able to do that, because if you had 50 grams or more of this crack, whether it was actual dope or ghost dope or conspiracy, they were able to give you up to a life sentence. And they actually did give a lot of people a life sentence, and a lot of them still have those life sentences.
And you're working with us now. You're an advocate. You've lobbied on a lot of issues, including the Equal Act and ending this disparity. You've heard the criticism that, if you look at the statistics, the people who are convicted of crack offenses are more likely to have a firearm as part of their conviction, or they're more likely to use violence or recidivate than people who use powder. There's a lot of reasons for that, I know, but what do you say to people who use that as a justification that they should treat these differently?
In regards to this house, I'm gonna say a little bit what Dejarion said. I believe it's based on some ignorance. When it comes to recidivism, there's a lot of reasons why people, actually, go back to prison. Sometimes it be the fact that once they're released, there are not any resources. They don't have any family or friends, or access to housing or employment. So there's a lot of reasons that people recidivate, and I couldn't just attest that to them having crack cocaine sentences. But when it comes to it being more addictive, we understand that both of these drugs type are addictive, but one is not more addictive than the other. It's just the way that they utilize those things in order to ingest it. But also the same fact that we know that in the communities of color, I just stated earlier when I gave my statement about how the drugs in the impoverished neighborhoods were available and they were cheaper, and more people utilized them as well as sold them. But when it comes to violent crime, even I think Dejarion stated that he was also held accountable for a gun offense.
Exactly.
So if there's violent or any other criminal activity or conduct that anybody utilizes, there's other guideline measures that you can use to increase that person's sentence. It's not like that because this person utilizes this drug and we got to bake in the ratio a sentence for that person in case he does do this, that we're just using this one size fits all for everybody. No, the sentencing guidelines as well as the court holds every individual accountable for each act that they commit. So it doesn't need to be baked in. And we understand that when it was made 100-1, it wasn't baked in then. All these arguments are coming after the fact. And I believe, like I said, sometimes, because the data disproves it, you know what I mean? But also, like I said, there's ignorance and a lack of understanding. And as I stated back in when they came up with the 100-1 ratio, they just moved out of fear and overreaction and came up with this 100-1 that wasn't, scientifically sound by no means. And now today, as we look at these things, the Sentencing Commission has came out and spoke out. Even certain administrations have came out and said, hey, we realized that we got it wrong. We want to make it right. But we can't make it 100% right until we make it 1-1.
Yeah. And I would say when the changes made that helped Stephanie get out a little earlier, the Fair Sentencing Act, when they made the guideline retroactive, the Sentencing Commission studied people who were released earlier under the crack guideline. They did not reoffend at a higher rate. It was the same or a little bit lower than people who served their full sentences. So that goes sort of to Dejarion's point. There's a there's a point where you're there too long and you're going to be more likely to reoffend. You get institutionalized. I mean, people who've been in prison know that. They see the people who learn how to live inside prison, and it gets harder for them to learn how to adjust to live outside. They're removed from technology, from the job cycle, and all those sorts of things. I'm going to go back around one time, and you all have been advocates for this, working with us, going to Capitol Hill. And Stephanie, I just, you've got Chairman Chuck Grassley or President Biden. You have the most senior government officials in front of you. What would you tell them about why this needs to be changed and why now? What do you think they might not understand that from having done this?
What they don't understand is what a person doing all that time. I'm looking at a woman's perspective. A woman doing all that time and they got kids, they don't know the damage they doing to that child. It's really messing them up. Like my oldest child, Rhett, today, he got a nervous problem. If you see him, his hand just shake. And that come from when I went to prison. They had to put him in. He went to councils and everything. He got messed up behind me not being there. It really affect them kids. And then when you locked up, them kids doing time too. And the worst thing you can do be in prison, hear your child cry, and you can't help them. It don't take that long. It didn't take me 21 years to learn from my mistake.
Yeah.
They don't understand that, but they don't understand until it hit home. Why does it take that?
Yeah. No, that's right. I mean, the family perspective is one. I mean, that's the one obviously we try to elevate, because even if people don't have sympathy for the person who committed the crime, or they can't get over that fact, they should understand that there's a lot of innocent collateral damage in the form of their family.
Yes.
Dejarion, same question to you. You've been with us and you've lobbied. You got 30 seconds to a minute to persuade our most vociferous critic why this has to happen, why this needs to happen now. What do you say?
I would just implore them to, put their political ideologies to the side, to put aside empirical evidence, anecdotal evidence that is on our side with regards to these laws needing to be changed, and just to lean into the humanity. The time is now. Again, I think that was perfect what Matthew said. It shouldn't have took 35 years. It shouldn't have took 35 minutes, let alone 35 years, for us to get to this point. So I would just again implore them to lean into humanity, because these are actual lives. This us three and three more on the next panel who have been affected by these egregious laws, and we have to eradicate these off the books. It would be good for us, and it would be good for the nation as a whole.
All right, thank you. And Matthew, you're going to have another chance to do this, I think, soon. But, the thinking up on Capitol Hill. These are people who have supported reform in the past, who now seem to have cold feet, probably because of the increase in crime, the politicization of the crime rate right now. What do you think they're missing the most?
I would say what they're missing the most is that this situation dealing with the Equal Act is to right a wrong that was done decades ago. We understand that nationwide crime is up and something needs to be done. But at the same token, we're talking about correcting something that has devastated communities of color, people of color, for decades. Something that was brought to, if we're talking about Congress, brought to Congress' attention before 2010 when they started looking at the Fair Sentencing Act and came to the conclusion that, hey, something needed to be done. And then they came up with another ratio. But anyway, something was done at that time, but they still took all that evidence and all that testimony that they heard prior to that and made those changes. Well, change still need to be made. And until we right the wrong completely, doing away with the I call it racial disparity between those two drug types. One that, like I said, we can look back and see the data. We can look back and see the history of all, 79% of Blacks were, charged with crack cocaine offense. 81% of Blacks since 2019 were charged with crack cocaine offense. So we see who is affecting the most. And we can't just turn our heads, our blind eye to it, knowing that we need to right this. And even as you stated and I stated, we understand that crime is up nationally, but righting this wrong has nothing to do with those other wrongs that you are addressing on a daily basis. So let's just get this fixed. Let's send these men and women home to their families. Like I said, we understand that, I also suffered under it. You know what I mean? You just got it wrong. So now you have the opportunity to make it right. And many of the legislators, as well as the president, endorse the Equal Act. You know what I mean? So he will sign it. So we just hope that it is able to get before him so that he will be able to sign it and right this wrong. And then we can move on to the next chapter and start addressing other things, because we still shouldn't be baffling or having conversation over something that should have been done as early as 2010, but
Yeah.
definitely in 2019, 20, and 21.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, this is not controversial. The National District Attorneys Association, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, Right on Crime, American Conservative Union, everybody on the right to everyone on the left to civil rights groups, everyone supports the Equal Act and making this change. So it's just not a partisan issue. It's not an ideological issue. Most people see this as just a matter of basic fairness. And so really not asking that much. And as you said, Matthew, it feels frustrating to be begging for these scraps at this point, because this should be a no-brainer, but here we are. So I want to thank you all, Dejarion, Matthew, Stephanie. Thanks for getting us right after work, Stephanie. Sorry we we got you in uniform, but that's a good look. And I'm going to bring out Jeffery McReynolds and Lavonda Bonds. And I don't know if Aundria Hicks is going to be able to join us, but we'll see. Oh, I guess we are. Great. Well, welcome to you three. Thank you for joining us. You heard the discussion. You know, they all suffered under this personally, and the difference. And I just want to note again that I am joined by 3 African-American panelists, because this is a crime that is largely impacting the Black community in this country, and it always has been. We've always known it as soon as they passed it. It's another reason to fix it, but you don't, even if you don't believe it, there's a reason to fix it. But I want to talk to you all because you have loved ones, family members, friends who are serving now, and for whom this is not an academic exercise. This bill passing would reunite your families sooner. And so I want to get that perspective, because I think lawmakers are missing that urgency. And so I'm going to start with you, Lavonda, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So can you just tell us a little about, your loved one, his sentence, how long he's got to go, and what it means to not have him home?
Okay, well, my husband, John Lee Bonds Jr., was sentenced to 288 months for distribution of crack cocaine. That was 13 years ago, so he served 13 years of that sentence. And yeah, he was sentenced under the 18-1 guidelines. He was sentenced under those guidelines because at that point when he went in, the law had changed to where they had dropped it down from 100-1 to 18-1. Mm-hmm. So his sentence was, like I said, under the 18-1 guidelines.
But still longer because
it's still longer because of the implements that they put inside the bill that they passed in the 94 crime bill.
And we always talk about this. He committed a crime. He deserved to be held accountable or punished. What do people not understand about how long this sentence is?
What they don't understand is it affects not only the mental aspect of the person that's serving a time, because they're sitting there and they're thinking, okay, well, it was so unfairly, I was sentenced so unfairly, because of what the times was in out in the world or whatever. So they're sitting there and it's mentally, they're fighting with that mentally. And on top of that, they have families out. They have kids. They have children. They have grandparents. They have siblings, mothers, fathers. It's like Ms. Knott said. It's affecting not just only them. It's affecting their whole family. So
well, somebody hears a sentence that long and they think, "Wow, that must be a hardened criminal. He must be a dangerous person."
Right. And my husband, he acknowledges that, he did wrong. But like Mr. Charles said, it doesn't equate to the sentence that they, gave him in the long run. Like, it's just unfair. Like,
yeah. And what do you know exactly what the sentence? I mean, do you know how much time he'd get off or how much sooner he'd come home if he?
Yes, he would. He was sentenced to 288 months. So If he was sentenced under the 1-to-1 guidelines, he would have been sentenced to 71 months.
Mhm.
So you see how big of a jump that was, you know,
Yeah.
from 288 to 71 months. So
he's coming home if this passes.
Yeah, he's coming. Yep, doors open. He's coming right home. But I also like to add that back to who it affects is it affects, the kids, 100%. They're being raised without fathers, without mothers, as Miss Stephanie Nod said. And it's hard. It takes a toll on not only them being locked up behind. It's affecting the kids. Like the kids are, they're fighting with themselves as far as, it's a mental game with them too as well. Like it's the kids are out here and they need them role models, their mothers, their fathers, and the emotional state that these kids are being raised without these parents is just so heartbreaking. It's very heartbreaking.
Yeah. Aundria, you know something about this as well. And I know you're joining us. You've got things going on tonight. And so if anything comes up that you need to jump off, please do. But can you share a little bit about your story and how your family and your loved ones been impacted by the disparity?
Sure. My loved one's name is Bobby Banks, and he was initially given 55 years for crack cocaine. When they passed the new law from the 18 to 1, he was resentenced and they still gave him 40 years. He has been incarcerated now for 17 years, the 18th year really soon. It's been extremely disheartening. I want to piggyback off of Lavonda and Miss Stephanie. Our children are damaged. They are missing and lacking a lot of things. There's no structure. We as parents, as moms, we work. We're trying to provide for them the best that we can. But we absolutely need their fathers. We need that male figure in our homes. We need them financially. We need the help. It leaves all of our homes at a single mother standpoint. And we just do the best we can to raise them the best way that we can. And so it's been a huge disparity in our homes. And then even for them, just being gone that long, from an educational standpoint and from a life standpoint, you're put back so many years, just to try to get some of that time back, to try to get them at a place where they can really thrive in society. It's a challenge. It's extremely hard. And so it's been a whole lot. It's just, like I said, we've missed, with our children, we've missed proms, we've missed graduations. 17 years is almost 2 decades. We're moving into grandchildren now. And then the toll that the toll that it takes us, just trying to help provide. We love them, so we don't want to leave them there. And so we try to do everything that we can to support from a mental standpoint, from a, hidden highways and trying to visit and supporting and writing letters, taking calls and calling attorneys. I mean, we're doing everything that we possibly can. And this Equal Act is just so important for so many of us as moms and as family members, because again, this Equal Act would bring Bob home. It would literally probably bring him home. And that's what we're praying for. And that's what we hope can come out of this outcome.
Yeah, that's really moving. And these politicians, they think I can't vote for something that lets somebody out because they may screw up and then I'm going to get blamed for that. And I feel like the disconnect is you all know the people that we're fighting for. These are your loved ones. And I feel like, lawmakers, they don't visit prisons. They don't know who we've got in there and for how long they're serving their sentences. I mean, tell us about your husband's readiness to be home now. What that people don't have to worry about this. Lesson learned, right? And it's time to move on.
Yes, with pertaining to. Go ahead, Aundria.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I didn't know he had called me or if he called you.
Yeah. I meant yeah.
I think that, for us, like Ms. Stephanie said, it doesn't take 20 years for anyone to get the lesson. You don't spank your kids forever. You just don't do that. You punish them, you hold them accountable, and you move forward. I mean, it's just that simple. For Bob, he's taken 68 classes. He's obtained his associate's degree. He's programmed. But when he still went before that judge, his file was not even looked at. That part of things was not even, it wasn't opened, it wasn't brought up. It was still based on what had been done prior.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, it's extremely disheartening for us parents, and it's disheartening for them to even to go through all of those things, to just be looked at, considered, and then for someone to say, no, we're going to still give you the maximum that we can give you. And so, we just want, for people to kind of look at, just take under consideration what they have did and how they have tried to better themselves. What educations they have tried to take up under their belt, or what programs that they have tried to do and to better themselves. I mean, it's just not being looked at the way that it should. It's not being taken into consideration the way that it should. And it, like I said, it leaves everyone at a place like, what do you do? Because we're not politicians. We are working class individuals. Again, just trying to take care of our families and kids. And I've said this before, I didn't commit a crime. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I've never been to prison before. But every day I'm in prison because he's there. And so it just affects everything. And we want them to really, really, really understand that every day is another day. Every month is another month. Every year is another year. And it's hard. It really is hard.
I think that's well said. Jeffrey, I want to bring you in. You not only serve time for a crack-related offense, but you have people you left behind and people still there. Talk about it from your perspective.
I'm muting. I want to say thanks for having me, Kevin. Everyone, how you doing, everyone? Thank y'all. Y'all stories is great, and I understand what everyone is going through on both sides. I have a good friend who I call a brother who's still incarcerated. His name is Eddie Cozy. I'll tell you, this disparity has harmed so many families. My brother Eddie Cozy, he's doing 400 months right now, which is 33 years and 4 months. I'm gonna show you a picture of him. This is him, everyone.
I think people think 33 years is a sentence for somebody who committed murder.
Correct. So, but what he was sentenced for, it was 7 grams of crack cocaine. 7 grams of crack cocaine is smaller than this cube you charge your phone with. Just giving you a visual of what people are being incarcerated for. They on this indictment, they charge him with 20 to life for ghost drugs, which the disparity of that, if the Equal Act would pass right now, he would been, you know what I'm saying? He did over 15 years of his sentence now. He's sitting there. He's married. He got married on his birthday of last year, August the 20th of 2021, to Kamalissa Cozy. He has a blended family, 10 children, 2 grandchildren, 5 young boys, 1 young daughter, and 4 adult girls. This affects a whole family. It shouldn't be right for them to continue to pass out sentences of this magnitude, because being a person that has to deal with this on the outside, because being a single mom, I understand where all you women are coming from, because I was a product of that. I left children here while the mother of my children had to take care of them for over 10 years. So trust me when I say this, we understand what you all are going through. Us men that actually pay attention to this. It's a fight that never ends. His father passed away last year. His mom is sick at times. So the Equal Act will actually bring him closer, give him time to rebuild the relationship with his family that he still has here now. The things that, I want the congressmen and senators to understand is this will help more than just one individual. It'll help families become families again. It'll help the men raise their young men, and be at daddy-daughter dances and be able to take the children to watch them go on prom and walk them down the aisle and be that support when they need it. It's just a lot going on with it, and we really would love for the Equal Act to pass. I wrote some stuff here for them, but being sentenced I was sentenced at 100-to-1 ratio. Now it changed to 18-to-1. 1-to-1, the Equal Act is what we need. The Equal Act will help more individuals, men and women, reunite with their families, with their children, and see people before they leave this earth. That's it's just hard just seeing that, we go through it, and some people, the people that had the power, they can just sit down, communicate, have a good conversation, and say, let's go ahead and do it. That's all it takes. You see the people that come home and not repeat offenders, doing right, making ways for others, being guidance counselors, being motivational speakers. Excuse me. And it's sorry just that people just don't understand that these laws need to change. Like not yesterday, like Dejarion and Matthew and everyone was saying to Stephanie, hey, it took 35 years. It doesn't take 35 years to figure this out.
Yeah. And you're an example of somebody like the others who benefited from reforms that were made retroactive. So your original sentence, you didn't end up serving. And so
Correct.
firsthand that just because we gave a sentence doesn't mean that fit.
Right, correct. When they sentenced me, to 235 months, which is 19 years, 7 months. So when I got I actually benefited from both reliefs. When it went to the drugs -2, then the First Step Act, Fair Sentencing Act, in 2014. So it was a blessing that I caught them. But I still did more time than I was supposed to because I was still incarcerated when they ruled and said that I was eligible to receive a reduction in my sentence.
Yeah. But people who think if you get out of your sentence early, that's somehow an unfair break or that you're not going to be ready. And here you are now running a business. You're at the, participating in a White House panel yesterday. There's this feeling that once we give a sentence, we can't change our minds or recognize that it's wrong. But there's so many people who have proven otherwise.
Yeah, I wish that I'm wishing and I'm continue to hope and pray that a lot of the judges say that they say it's to the judge's discretion, but if you tie their hands with these ratios and these sentencing guidelines and things of that nature, how is it to the judge's discretion if they're bound by a piece of paper? You can change that. If the judge has discretion, the judge do his due diligence. That's his job. That's what he was hired for. Everyone voted him in to be the judge of the higher court. So don't bound his hands. Let him be free to sentence the man at a lower, male or female at a lower rate or whatever fits the crime. Don't give me a life sentence for something that happened years ago and you build it on it over time. It doesn't work like that. It shouldn't work like that, but that's how it's working now. So
yeah, I want to bring in Lavonda and then Aundria again. I think that you both talked about this. You're the single mom. Now you're running the household. There's so much on you. And the thing that's hardest for me, knowing you all and others who are involved in this fight, is when I lobby congressional staffers or members of Congress, the worlds are so disconnected. They're thinking about their political future. They're thinking about how the party's going to do in the election and whether there's enough votes to overcome a filibuster and all of these things that are so detached from the life and death sort of struggle you feel on a day-to-day basis. And so I just want you to, Lavonda, you've come and done this with us, and so have you, Aundria. It's like you've got you got the member of Congress in front of you who can make this happen. You got Senator Grassley in front of you. What do you say to try to impart to him like what your life is like and how it would change if this passed?
I would like to say to Senator Grassley and everybody else who maybe have doubts about someone getting out and in society and maybe going back for another crime or something, that it's a lot of people that's been sentenced to these long crimes and sentences that they've went in and gotten their GED, they're gotten college degrees, they're finishing programs, they have a good support system when they get out. Like my husband has a good support system. Of course, I've been married to him 5 years. I'm his biggest number one supporter. But he has his kids that support him, his mom, his dad. I mean, he has a support system. So he's in there, he's preparing himself for the outside world when they do let him out. So, I mean, they're getting GEDs, they're preparing themselves. So that's what they are doing. They're working on themselves. And then these are the same people that went in when they were in their late teens, early 20s, late 30s. And then they're serving 10, 20, 15 years behind bars, and they're working on themselves. They're not the same person that they were when they went 25 years ago or 10 years ago. Of course, everybody changes. So, I mean, it's also a natural change because you're going to change with age, but you're also working on yourself. So, you have this strong support system out here. And with that strong support system, that's giving them strength to come out and do the right thing when they get out. So I applaud everybody that's in there working on themselves and because they got strong support systems out here. I talk to Miss Aundria at least once a week, and me and her talk about our significant others and what we're doing to work on strengthening our bonds and stuff for when they're able to get out. So we're working on ourselves and they're working on themselves so they won't go back. So we're all just I would like to just say to them to just keep in mind that the Equal Act needs to be passed. It's been unfair for too long. It's been unfair for over 35 years now. So I mean, it's just unfair and unjust. The sentences doesn't equate to what the crime was. And like I said, once again, like you're having individuals that's going in their early 20s. So they're growing, they're changing. They admit to crimes that they've done that has been wrong. They admit to that they need to be sentenced, but it doesn't equate to the unfairness of it, right. The disparity. Right. So yeah.
All right, Aundria, I want to bring you in. I can't believe we're running out of time so quickly here, but I want to, we're close, and yet in some ways we're really far because we're not guaranteed passage. We're in a very political environment. It's a election year. The parties are politicizing crime and justice issues. And we had this huge House vote, as you know. We have support in the Senate. What's the urgency that you think that members of Congress need to understand from those of you who are living and don't want to wait another year or 5 years for something to finally get fixed?
We really want them to understand, Kevin, that we need them. We need them now, not like you said, not 5 years, not 3 months from now. We need them today. It's killing our families. It's such a disruption to just the growth overall again. And as women, like Lavonda said, we don't just talk, Kevin. We are fasting. We're on our knees. We're praying. We're fasting. Every Thursday we fast. We're fasting individuals. And we're asking, we're doing everything in our means, like she said, to support them. And we need congressmen to understand that we need them. Our hands are tied. We don't understand everything that they have going on, but it's leaving our situations extremely broken. And it just keeps moving in that direction until we can correct this situation and we can get on the right track and we can get our loved ones home. I mean, it's time. It's time, and we cannot do this without them. We can't. We can holler, we can write letters, we can march, we can advocate, but laws have to be changed for movement to happen. And that's what we are trying to do. And we need them. We need them to understand that we are human. People make mistakes. And a lot of these people are non-violent offenders. That's what we need to most definitely keep in mind. Most of these individuals, these are non-violent offenders. So let's just stick to what it is. It's, let's not bring in the violence. These are non-violent offenders, and we need them. We need them.
All right. Well, you sold me, but that was years ago. You sold me on this. I want to say to folks, we're getting close, but we need your help. You can text ACTION to 21333 to contact your members of Congress and your senators to let them know to support the Equal Act. We're pushing hard for a vote as quickly as possible, but we want to make sure that we have the votes that we need. I want to thank all of you. I know it's not easy even to take time off at night to share these stories and these experiences. You have other things to do. So I want to thank Lavonda, Jeffrey, Aundria, Matthew, Dejarion, and Stephanie, who are on the earlier panel. I want to tell folks, we need your help to get this done. There's a lot of criminal justice reform that could happen. We saw yesterday the president granted clemency to some people, including folks who were serving disparate sentences because of crack cocaine. He's not going to fix those all through clemency power. We need a change in the law. And this change in the law would allow people to go back to the judge and get sentenced under a fair 1-to-1. It's not a guaranteed release. If somebody's in prison doing bad things and a threat to people, they're not likely to be released because a judge is going to do that. So there's no guarantee, but we got to get this Equal Act passed as soon as possible. The closer we get to the election, the harder it's going to be. So please reach out, contact your lawmakers. Again, thanks for everybody who was on the panel, and thanks for everybody who joined us.
Thank you.